Bienvenidos a una nueva edición del Business Talk, un espacio organizado por la Universidad Tecnológica del Perú, UTP, para que ejecutivos y académicos compartan experiencias sobre nuevas tendencias de gestión en la comunidad empresarial. Hoy presentaremos la conferencia Redefiniendo el trabajo con IA, cómo la automatización está impulsando innovación. Esta presentación estará a cargo de la doctora Sara Globa, profesora adjunta en la Universidad de Duke, a quien le damos la bienvenida. La doctora Globa es reconocida por su trabajo en la intersección entre la academia y la industria. Sara es profesora adjunta de comunicación empresarial y desarrollo de liderazgo en la Universidad de Duke y también lo ha hecho en la Universidad Estatal de Carolina del Norte. Tiene un PhD en tecnología instruccional y una maestría en comunicación técnica por la Universidad Estatal de Carolina del Norte. Y cuenta además con una licenciatura en inglés e historia de la Universidad de Carolina del Norte en Wilmington. Como experta en innovación tecnológica, ha liderado más de 300 conferencias, talleres y seminarios, destacando por su capacidad para desglosar conceptos complejos en estrategias aplicables, especialmente en el ámbito de la inteligencia artificial y la automatización. Fundadora y CEO de Rife Media, una firma de e-learning galardonada, ha trabajado con líderes globales y ha sido reconocida por sus contribuciones al ámbito académico y empresarial. Además, este año fue incluida en el Salón de la Fama de Mujeres Empresarias de Carolina del Norte. Bienvenida, Sara. Al concluir la presentación vamos a tener un panel en el que nos van a acompañar Andrés Villas Rivas, LATAM Customer Engineer para Artificial Intelligence and Machine Learning en Google, Bernardino Bravo Mejía, CTO de Sura, y Daniel Falcón, CEO de Neo Consulting. Muchas gracias por acompañarnos en esta nueva edición del Business Talk organizado por UTP. Los dejo entonces con la presentación a cargo de la doctora Sara Globa. Adelante, por favor, Sara.
Thank you so much. Gracias, senor. And hola, hello. I am thrilled to be here with you, UTP, for Business Talks. I have been looking forward to this exciting conversation. Over the next 20 minutes, I want to talk with you about redefining work with AI and how automation is empowering new innovations. So, we're going to explore together some really exciting trends that I think many of us are seeing and experiencing. But in addition to that, what I'd also like to do is share a critical message about preparing for this shift to where more and more people and businesses and organizations are going to be working with AI and with automation and what that could mean for our world, the way that we work, and the way that we live. And so I'm going to do this in two parts. First, let's talk about AI and automation and some of the really cool things that we're all seeing. After that, let's talk about this shift. Where are we right now in the AI and automation timeline? What does that mean for you and for your work and for your research? And what could it look like going forward, especially if we're the ones who are most prepared to help our teams, our organizations, our students, our university to be ready for this shift? So let's start with this first part. Let's dive in and talk about AI and automation and what we're seeing. Before we do, I want to introduce an idea of dreaming big. We're about to talk about AI and automation of the future. And so I want to open us up with big imaginations. To help inspire us to do just that, I want to share a quote from Carlos Ismael Noriega, the first Peruvian born astronaut to fly into outer space, who once said, "The only closed doors are the ones you are willing to acknowledge." Too many people assume that there are obstacles preventing their success, so they don't even try. You will only achieve if you try. I love this quote. It's very inspirational, and what an inspirational person to share it with us. The reason I picked it to kick this part off is because I want to encourage you to consider open doors. Let's dream big in this next section and be really open with our imaginations about what could come next, what we could see with AI and automation. I have 4 trends that I want to talk to you about in this section. 4 things that I look for or have been noticing and paying a lot of attention to in both my research and in my work as a journalist. The first trend I want to talk to you about is real-time analytics. The AI tools that are already detecting fraud in real time, forecasting demand spikes based on external factors like weather or social trends. It's been so impressive to watch real time analytics grow and expand in different industries and to see what this can do. But let's dream big for a second. I want you to imagine, if you can, your favorite restaurant, the place that you love to go. Does this restaurant change their menu every once in a while? Maybe they add new specials or new dishes. Can you imagine if you went to this restaurant in the future and they had not just the menu options that were in front of you, but also the option to almost whip up anything in the kitchen with their ingredients? What if they were using real time analytics to forecast trends so that they knew what people might be interested in, to track the weather so that they knew what would be available, to track things like traffic and the calendar of the community around so that they could predict demand for their staff and for their food? So that when you came in and you quickly shared through maybe your fingerprint or some other data, that you quickly shared your preferences and your food allergies and some of your favorite foods or things that you wanted to try. And the menu was able to adapt to you. It's really interesting to think about how all of these data sets could potentially converge. And it's even more interesting when we apply it not just to the high tech industries, but to all industries. And so thinking about our favorite restaurant and what it could look like in years future, if these real-time analytics are able to allow these restaurants to get more creative with their menus and to optimize demand. The next trend I want you to think about is hyper-personalization. I love talking about this one because I remember working in marketing when we were so excited that we could add a form field for first name. Because before that, we couldn't tailor every email. But wow, the magic of that mail merge when I could send an email and it didn't just say hello there, it said, hello, Javier, or hello, Sarah. I remember when that was so exciting. And now we're thinking about hyper personalization, looking at personalized products, custom treatment plans. AI is enabling personalization and tailored interactions on a massive scale. And when I think about what this could look like, I think about my own home and how it's so common for us to have an oven, a microwave, a television. But what about the nurse, the robot nurse that I might have in my home here in the next few decades, few years? A nurse that could help with, of course, basic first aid. But what if this nurse was also helping to personalize my family's healthcare plans? What if this robot nurse was looking at air quality data, looking at our family's activity levels through the health metrics on our wearables? And what if this robot nurse was able to make recommendations about dietary changes that we might consider, or exercises we might try that day, or medical procedures that we may need to schedule? It's interesting to think about this hyper personalization and the way that the products and services that we might use today that are more generic could not only become personalized, but more local to our homes, our offices. The next trend I want to talk about is operational efficiency and HCI, or human computer interaction. The idea that by automating repetitive tasks while generating ideas, these AI tools are working in partnership with humans, which allows people, us, to focus on the high value strategic tasks. Now, this is not a new dream. We've been thinking about this since the early days of the Jetsons cartoon, when we imagined that eventually robots and automation would help get rid of tasks like housework and laundry so we could focus on high value tasks. But what's so interesting is to see this coming to fruition, to see more companies and organizations, more teams, students, and employees being able to augment their work with more support for operational efficiency from the technology around them. One of my favorite examples in pop culture that's really easy to reference here is from Iron Man. In the second Iron Man movie, there's a very popular scene where Tony Stark gets back to his home office and he turns on the lights and computers and robots in his lab and he says, "Wake up, Daddy's home." And then he proceeds to do some really impressive work with the support of the computers and machines around them. Now, when that came out in 2010, it looked so much more futuristic than it does today. Now, this looks like something that we might be able to see, maybe at a university like UTP, as we see more of this technology becoming something that we work alongside of. But as we're dreaming big, what could it look like when we see this more at scale? I like to imagine a business owner who owns a company and is headquartered in one place, but maybe their source materials or their customers are located somewhere else across the globe. And instead of diffusing a team to that space, they stand up a facility that can be built, that can be managed, that can manufacture and eventually even ship, all without needing people on the ground in that location. What's it going to look like when we can have these remote manufacturing and shipping centers that genuinely our team at base, our team in our base or main company, we don't have to go to these remote facilities and we can stand them up pretty quickly. We're seeing efficiencies with 3D printing that help with repairs and parts being available at those sites. And so it's interesting to think about these almost micro facilities that we're going to be able to stand up pretty quickly that are closer to either the source of the materials or to our end customers. And what could that do to help with sustainability, cut down on shipping and transportation of materials or supplies or products? Really interesting to think about, and it's exciting to be able to track. The last trend that I want to talk about is one that's very close to us right now, and it's just the business of AI infrastructure. So the companies in tech and in telecommunications that are preparing for a surge in AI workloads by expanding cloud data centers, increasing internet speeds, and investing in edge tech, basically the infrastructure technology, the companies, the products, the services that make AI and automation possible. Anyone who is paying attention to Alphabet in the last couple of weeks, the parent company that owns Google, saw some pretty healthy revenue numbers related to the cloud computing that we think is only going to increase as AI workloads increase. And so it's really interesting to continue following this trend. Who are the businesses that are supporting the AI infrastructure? And what does it look like for them to continue supporting? One of the things I was imagining with my students recently was the idea of the technology that we have in our homes and our businesses. And as it grows, who are the companies that are going to be profiting from that, that are going to be in the business of supporting that? And what could it look like? How might it change? I live in a neighborhood right now where everyone who lives in the neighborhood has access to a neighborhood pool, a neighborhood swimming pool. What might it look like if we get a neighborhood supercomputer so that we all have access in turn to faster processing when we need it? Is there an opportunity for that kind of infrastructure to grow? And if so, who are the companies that are going to be supplying that? It's interesting to think about these trends. And as I promised, I wanted to introduce this in a dream big scenario. But really, it's because I want us to be thinking about AI and automation as we consider this next question. How can we be preparing for this shift as we grow to see more AI and automation? Now, to ask this question of you, I want to share a video with you. It's only about 30 seconds, but in this video, you're going to see two people who are interacting with a piece of technology for really the first time. This is brand new, cutting edge technology. They're very excited about what it can do for them, what it can do for their work. And you're going to see that excitement as they interact with the technology to do something that before this technology existed was really unheard of. So, can you prepare yourself? Are you ready? We're going to watch this cutting edge technology together here in about a 30-second clip.
We want currency formats. This one looks good.
My spreadsheet doesn't do that.
Okay, I admit it. That was pretty neat, but you'll never finish it. This isn't good enough to present. You can't show her this.
Oh, ye of little faith.
I really think she'd buy the bus store.
With a click on the auto format, our superhero shops through several professionally designed formats and applies one.
That one.
With a click of his mighty mouse.
I can't believe it. You did it. We did it. It looks great. This is a miracle.
This is Microsoft Excel.
Okay. Thank you for going on that elevator ride with me. So I teed it up as cutting edge technology. And it was in 1990, in the early 1990s, when this video came out, it was showing something that many people were excited about. And it was the advantages of using something like Microsoft Excel to organize data and share it with others. Now, if that doesn't sound super cutting edge to you, maybe you never had to work in an office with the physical stencils that people would use to color with marker and to create paper and large folio pictures of the charts and stats that they were going to share. I actually have a set of those stencils that my father-in-law used in his corporate office. My kids now use them to create drawings. But back when that was how we would create charts, of course, something like being able to quickly format a table was so exciting. I want to share a point about this elevator ride. It's almost like a prediction. I think that very soon, the way that we currently talk about what we can do with tools like ChatGPT is going to feel a lot like this elevator ride. The language they were using, they called the person who was interacting with Excel a superhero as he clicked his mighty mouse and then performed that miracle of auto formatting that table. I think that it's not going to be a lot of time between now and when we start to think back about how we talk about ChatGPT. Wow, it created a whole meal plan for my week when I told it what was in my fridge. Isn't that a miracle? I think we're going to be talking about that, just like we saw them talking in this elevator. And I think that the rapid transformation means that we're going to be looking back at this moment a lot sooner than the decades it's taken for us to look back at this video. But let's think about that timeline together for a minute. We really had computers for, let's just call it an even 50 years before we had Microsoft Excel. And I'm just using that technology as an example because we just saw it in this brilliant video. So if you create kind of a rudimentary timeline with this exponential growth, we've got early computing on one side where we've got a computer taking up a whole room, right? And then let's follow the timeline and let's imagine that now we're here, we've arrived, we've got robots in our manufacturing centers, we've got smart cars, we can interact with ChatGPT and other AI tools on our devices, and we've got these amazing smartphones, right? So here's this timeline. And what I would ask you is where would you put Microsoft Excel on this timeline? In a very scientific way, I'm going to put it right there. Okay, so let's imagine Microsoft Excel was right there. I want to argue that that was a really important shift. And again, I'm using it as an example, but what it really represents to me is the time period when the power of computing started to reach more people. It was a shift where we started to move away from computing only being available to the elite academics, these really niche tech clubs or rich corporates. Computing moved to something that more households, more companies could buy, plug in, and use. Now, that shift was in the 90s for computing. And when we think about this shift, it's helpful to remember what was before then, right? So really right before the 90s, we had things like this extraordinary IBM computing system for the low price of under $18,000, right? And that was back in the 70s. So that $18,000. Whew. And so the shift in the 90s was when both the cost of computing and also the ease of computing changed so that more people could participate. And that's been a really interesting shift for folks like me to study as we look at the history of technology and adoption. But the question that I want to share with us today in UTP Business Talks is this question of now. Are we experiencing now the shift for AI and automation? Another way to ask this is, when are we? When are we in the AI and automation adoption timeline? Because we can do a similar timeline, starting off with the idea that AI is actually pretty old. The first publicly recognized machine learning system was Samuel's checkers player, developed by Arthur Samuel in 1959. So if we start our timeline there, we could even imagine the end of our timeline based on those 4 trends that I shared. But we're not there yet, right? We don't have the restaurant menus of the future that are based on real-time analytics and adjusting the restaurant inventory based on data that's being pulled in. We don't have the robot nurse quite yet, the completely autonomous manufacturing systems that can be stood up quickly. And certainly we are still growing in what that AI infrastructure looks like if we're going to get more people involved. So we're not necessarily there yet. So when are we? What I'd like to share as an idea with you today in UTP Business Talks is that we are at the shift for AI and automation. So what was the 1990s shift in computing, the idea of more folks getting access? We're there. Now, we're not in the 90s, so we'll call it the 2020s of AI. And in the 2020s of AI, similarly, we're experiencing this really powerful shift. So just as cheaper computers and GUIs or graphical user interfaces extended the power of computing to more people, teams, and industries, ChatGPT and similar tools are expanding access to AI and automation so that finally more people are joining the conversation that was started all the way back with Samuel's checkers. And so if this shift is where we are now, and we know that just like in the 90s with computing, that this shift is going to transform how we work and think and innovate, then the question I want to ask is, are you ready? And I can ask it in the context of those trends that I shared earlier. And this is an exercise that I love to do with my students. We ask if we're ready to help evaluate and shape the interconnected systems and interoperable data frameworks that are going to enable those real-time insights and automation. How are all these different data sets going to play well together? We have to figure out what this can look like if we're going to see the kind of real-time analytics affecting all industries and businesses in the way that we're dreaming about right now. Are we ready to help build the trust and transparency and oversight that will help more people allow and adapt to data collection and hyper-personalization? In other words, are we going to be part of the solution as people have questions about data privacy and questions about allowing this kind of hyper-personalization? Yes, the benefits are enormous, but what are we willing to sacrifice in relation to our own data privacy? And how are we helping more people have those conversations and creating the kinds of conversations that move this transparency and oversight forward? Are we ready to help scale the computing and connectivity needed to support reliable and resilient on-site data analytics and remotely managed manufacturing? Because again, we're not there yet, but we're getting closer. And resiliency is really important. A lot of the industries that I talk to are saying things like, yes, the technology is there, but we can't rely on it yet. And so what does it look like to build that kind of technology in a way that we can rely on it? And then finally, are we ready to help design and manufacture the devices and the infrastructure that's needed to support the deployment of this technology to everyone? What does that look like? And how are we accessing communities to learn what it could look like to deploy there and helping to make sure that everyone is getting a chance to participate here? And so the question turns to you of where are you shifting? Where are you in this shift? Where are you participating? Where are you learning more? What I want to finish with is this idea that we've seen this before. A big part of my research is helping to share the idea that, yes, technology reshapes our world, but we've seen it do this before, and we will see this happen again. And so the question is, if technology reshapes our world, and we know that those who are ready are the ones who are going to be defining what comes next, those who are ready for this shift are going to have the biggest impact on what it looks like. And we know that AI is no different. Just like other technology shifts, it's going to be really important for folks to be ready, to be experimenting, to be open to learning more. Then how can you get ready for the shift? What are the things that you're doing to help yourself or your organization or your students or your teams or your neighborhoods to get ready for this? It's a really exciting question and one that I love helping folks explore. And I can't thank you enough for your time and attention today as we brought this talk to UTP Business Talks. It's been a lot of fun having this conversation with you about redefining work with AI and looking at how automation is empowering new innovations. And I'm really excited to hear your questions. I want to first thank the UTP faculty, staff, and students who made today's talk possible and say that it's been such a pleasure to join you. But those are my remarks, and I look forward to taking questions.
Muchas gracias, Sara. Excelente presentación. Ahora, con el objetivo de compartir experiencias y reflexiones a partir de la presentación, quiero presentar a los panelistas que hoy nos acompañan. Andrés Villarribas, LATAM Customer Engineer para Artificial Intelligence and Machine Learning en Google. Andrés Villa es un experto en analítica, Machine Learning e inteligencia artificial con una trayectoria destacada en empresas líderes del sector tecnológico. Durante 7 años en IBM y 9 años en SAS, Adquirió una sólida experiencia que ahora aplica como Customer Engineer en Google, donde se enfoca en desarrollar proyectos de inteligencia artificial generativa, GenAI, en América Latina. Andrés posee un máster en Big Data Science de la Universidad de Barcelona y su pasión por aprender y aplicar nuevas tecnologías es evidente en su enfoque para ayudar a las empresas a transformar sus procesos, productos y servicios mediante el uso de Generative AI con Google Cloud. Bernardino Bravo Mejía, CTO de Sura. Bernardino es el gerente de tecnología de AFP Integra, parte del grupo Sura, donde ha liderado la transformación tecnológica de la empresa desde diciembre de 2020. Con más de 20 años de experiencia en el sector financiero y de tecnología, ha ocupado posiciones clave como subgerente de servicios de sistemas, ha gestionado proyectos estratégicos y servicios críticos para fondos y seguros. Anteriormente desempeñó roles destacados en consultoría de sistemas, liderando la implementación de proyectos para el Grupo Sura y consultor de canales virtuales. Su experiencia abarca análisis, diseño e implementación de soluciones tecnológicas y es reconocido por su capacidad para gestionar proyectos complejos, optimizar procesos y promover la innovación dentro de las organizaciones. Daniel Falcón, CEO de Neo Consulting. Daniel Falcón, gerente y fundador de Neo Consulting, empresa de consultora con más de 20 años en LATAM, especializados en asesorar grandes empresas en generar resultados de negocios con data, GenAI e inteligencia artificial. Daniel tiene una extensa experiencia colaborando con organizaciones ayudándoles a enfrentar los desafíos de la era digital y alcanzar un crecimiento sostenible. Su enfoque integral combina habilidades en estrategia, análisis, comercio electrónico e inteligencia artificial para ofrecer soluciones personalizadas a clientes de diversas industrias y regiones. Bienvenidos todos a este panel. Quisiera comenzar el panel invitándolos a reflexionar sobre la presentación de Sara. Su exposición nos ha ofrecido una visión muy profunda sobre el impacto de la IA y la automatización de los negocios. Y ha destacado puntos clave que merecen una mayor exploración. Yo, de hecho, estos 4 puntos que presentó de Real-Time Analytics, Cyber Personalization, Operational Efficiency y Business of AI Infrastructure, me parecen que son justamente los puntos clave donde va a impactar muy rápido la inteligencia artificial. Andrés, Bernardino, Daniel, me gustaría que compartan sus reflexiones iniciales. ¿Qué ideas de la presentación consideran más relevantes para el contexto actual de las empresas y cómo podrían aplicarse en sus respectivas áreas? Dejo la pregunta abierta para ver quién quiere comenzar.
Si desean, empiezo yo. Bueno, primero, súper buena la presentación. Gracias por la invitación. Un gusto estar con ustedes. Para mí, la pregunta final, yo creo que es la más importante si estamos listos. En estas últimas semanas he conversado con varios de nuestros clientes en Perú, en México, y el tema que he encontrado en casi todas las empresas es que hay hay un requerimiento estratégico que el comité directivo, que los CEOs han bajado hacia los equipos, que inteligencia artificial generativa son muy importantes, pero que ya en el lado de los equipos, esto no pasa tanto porque, claro, lo primero que hay que lograr como resultado son las ventas, la rentabilidad. Hemos tenido 2 años complicados en el Perú. Y yo creo que aquí tiene que ver mucho dos temas que si estamos listos como organizaciones. Yo hace un año estoy viviendo aquí en Francia y trato de estar muy de lo que pasa en el ecosistema europeo y sobre todo el francés. Y claro, el mindset es lo que diferencia, no las capacidades que podemos tener en las empresas, no a veces ni siquiera el acceso a tecnología que ya está mucho más democratizado, pero es el mindset que nosotros tenemos como eh, gerentes, como trabajadores en una organización. Yo creo que aquí está lo que deberíamos poder centrarnos. Como bien decía, esto ya pasó antes y va a volver a pasar. Esto pasó con el Internet y el acceso que se tenía. Esto pasó con el correo electrónico, con la nube, con el comercio electrónico, con mobile, y seguramente va a seguir pasando. O sea, ¿cómo lo vamos a aprovechar para nuestras organizaciones y para nuestro país y región? Y finalmente hay un quote que me gusta mucho de un escritor de ciencia ficción que él menciona que el futuro ya está entre nosotros, pero no está distribuido de forma equitativa. Y yo creo que no está distribuido de forma equitativa porque tenemos que trabajar mucho más en estar preparados y sobre todo el mindset y la cultura de las empresas me parece lo fundamental. Súper bueno y de hecho es una buena reflexión que me deja para la presentación, que me deja para ir viendo cómo lo podemos trabajar más en nuestras empresas, nosotros mismos también.
Hola, si yo quisiera continuar también, primero agradecer por la invitación y feliz de poder compartir este panel. Muchas gracias, Sara, por tu presentación, excelente. También me quedo con la reflexión de si estamos preparados. Y, y parte de la respuesta a esa pregunta, al menos desde la visión del Grupo Sura y de AFP Integra, donde trabajo, eh, viene más por el lado de tener todos ese conocimiento y entendimiento de qué es la IA, qué puede hacer y qué no puede hacer, ¿no? Hay veces escuchamos mucho en noticias, escuchamos en diferentes medios, que es como la solución mágica, ¿no? Que la IA vino a resolver todos los problemas, ¿no? Y en realidad quizás sí, pero todavía no estamos a ese nivel, ¿no? En la curva todavía no estamos tan altos, estamos un poco más bajos, ¿no? Entonces, creo que es importante, desde mi punto de vista, el tema de la democratización, ¿no? Todos tener un entendimiento de cómo se usan esas herramientas, qué es la IA. Y hoy, por ejemplo, dentro del Grupo Sura tenemos, digamos, estamos atacando dos frentes, ¿no? Por un lado, todo lo que nos estamos apoyando con centros de excelencia de IA, ¿no? Para poder establecer todo lo que son políticas y gobiernos, ese es por un lado. Y por el otro lado, sabemos que tenemos que mantener como o crear un nivel de conocimientos en toda la compañía, ¿no? Y a diferentes niveles, ¿no? Eh, cada colaborador de la compañía, lo que esperamos es que sepa qué es la IA, cómo se usa, cómo puede potenciar su trabajo. Si no tenemos esa primera base de entendimiento y esa primera, digamos, esa primera capa de saber qué cosa es y qué es lo que puede hacer, difícilmente podemos nosotros estar hablando de cómo potenciar mi trabajo o saber qué cosas puedo hacer o no hacer con la IA, ¿no? Entonces, ese es para nosotros un primer frente súper relevante de tener como esa línea base de entendimiento y de conocimiento y naturalmente eso combinarlo con lo que es políticas y gobiernos, justamente para poder hacer un uso responsable de la IA.
Bueno, buenísimo. Igualmente, Sara, muchas gracias por tu presentación, súper interesante. Yo generalmente, bueno, yo soy Andrés Villa, ya me presentaron. Generalmente yo comienzo compartiendo una reflexión sobre estos temas de IA. Y creo que mucha gente, como creo que han mencionado, parece un superpoder, ¿no les parece? Parece como que, wow, como magia, como un superpoder, ¿no? Y al menos yo abro las conferencias siempre hablando un poco de, si pudiese tener un superpoder, ¿cuál sería, no? Y te pregunto, Sara, si me permites dirigirme a ti, si pudieses tener un superpoder el día de mañana, ¿cuál sería? ¿Cuál sería tu superpoder?
That's a
Cualquiera que
great
quiera responder.
question. I think I would want to fly. I think I would want to fly.
Suena genial, suena genial. Yo generalmente abro esta pregunta y aquí en Latinoamérica todo el mundo dice que quiere teletransportarse para huir del tráfico, claramente, ¿ok? Mi esposa me dijo el mejor superpoder, que es comer sin engordar. Así de sencillo. ¿Ok? Sin embargo, la siguiente pregunta, el follow-up question, es ¿cómo transformas ahora este superpoder en una idea de negocio que sea rentable, que sea escalable, que sea robusta, que pueda cumplir con diferentes áreas de la necesidad, que sea responsable, por ejemplo, que realmente respete al usuario, ¿no? Y entonces, a veces hay algunos superpoderes, ¿no? El mío, comer sin engordar, no es de mucha utilidad, ¿no? Como que no sirve de nada, ¿no? Entonces yo creo que lo más importante es ver realmente cuál es el problema de negocio o el problema social también, ¿no? Por supuesto todo es un negocio y todo, obviamente todo el mundo quiere producir, pero también hay problemas sociales que pueden cubrirse o abarcarse utilizando inteligencia artificial. Eh, y personalmente sí te quería hacer una pregunta o dirigirme hacia ti directamente con una pregunta, y yo estoy seguro que esto te lo tenía que haber preguntado antes, ¿no? Pero nosotros estamos en Latinoamérica, estamos en Perú. Quería saber primero si tú habías tenido la aventura o la fortuna de visitar algún país de Latinoamérica. Y si en tu análisis, en tu estudio, ¿cómo ves estos temas de democratizar el conocimiento y la digitalización en diferentes niveles de los estratos sociales? Punto número uno. Y no sé, si pudieses también pedir un deseo, ¿no? ¿Cuál podría ser esa acción para acelerar que todos pudiesen beneficiarse de la misma manera de estos avances de tecnología?
Great questions. For your question of getting to participate and visit countries in Latin America, you can't see it now behind my screen, but I have a big map behind me in my office of all the places that I've been lucky to share these kinds of talks. And I actually recently had a chance to share it in Belgium and had the opportunity to hear myself introduced in French. And this just gave me today the chance to be introduced in Spanish. And it's just been wonderful traveling to different locations. I have had a chance to do some of this work in Mexico. And many of my students at Duke University are from South America and have given me perspectives on what it's like for them as they consider most of the students that I work with are in an MBA program. And so they are here in the US for 1 to 2 years. And then most of the students that I work with are planning to travel back to where they are from and to bring this expertise with them. And so the challenges that I hear most often are related to more barriers in entrepreneurship, especially scaling and access to financing. And then also connections to bigger companies where there are places in South America, in Latin America, where what I've heard is that there is incredible knowledge and even experience. And so connecting that potential workforce, especially related to skill sets that are so necessary in AI and automation, to companies who may be able to leverage that but are not located in Latin America. And so bridging more of those connections and making those connections really strong, especially with the growth of remote work, is something that my students have expressed a lot of interest in. And so something we've seen increasing here with the university programs that we have are partnerships with study abroad programs, sister schools, or partnerships between universities where students are able to share time. And then programs like this that invite outside experts to participate at local universities to share that. And my hope would be that those strengths continue. But what I would wish for, if I could dream really big, and you've just invited me to dream about flying, so I'm going to dream really big. If I could dream really big, it would be seeing more of the companies that are in Latin America and that are doing things in Latin America that they're able to grow and scale, and not necessarily the workforce. The connections to the companies that are here in the US and Europe and other spaces that my students have talked about wanting to work with, I think that's really powerful, and I would love to see that grow. But even more than that, I would love to see the companies that are in Latin America doing this, and that those companies have an opportunity to find client bases and customers outside of Latin America. And so that would be, in my mind, an even better scenario. I know that the challenges are unique to the different locations, but I think one thing that a lot of us have in common, no matter where we talk about this, is the mindset challenge that we heard from our first two panelists and their responses. And I heard something really interesting about this the other day that I wanted to share. And it was the challenge of legacy systems. So we hear a lot about legacy systems, right? And the argument that the most challenging legacy system is the operating system that we have in here. And I thought that was a really great reminder that sometimes the mindset shift is the system that we're operating on in our brains, not necessarily the systems in the places that we work. And I think helping more people to see themselves in this tech revolution. I think that in the past, tech revolutions continue to leave folks behind. And the quote that we heard from the science fiction author that talked about that not everyone gets to participate in a tech revolution at the same rate or at the same time. And a lot of times that's very inequitable. Something that I see in my research is that there's an expectation from folks who are in areas where they may not have seen rapid tech transformation before, the expectation being that they're not going to get to participate in it this time either. But what we're seeing is that's not necessarily the case because the amount of technology necessary and the availability of this technology at a much cheaper price could allow for more participation. And so we want to, as much as we can, fight against that mindset. And also for the organizations that are well resourced, making sure they have a sense of responsibility to share and that they see that it's in their best interest to make sure that more folks are able to participate in this tech revolution. So that's the kind of mindset shift that I think is really important and that I'm glad that we're talking about.
Muchísimas gracias por tu respuesta, Sara. Gracias.
Gracias también, Andrés. Vamos a comenzar con algunas preguntas para el panel. Comencemos con Daniel Falcón. ¿Cuál ha sido el mayor desafío en la transformación digital de empresas peruanas? ¿No? Un poco siguiendo la pregunta. ¿Y cómo lo aborda Neo Consulting?
Gracias, Javier. Mira, el mayor desafío, yo sigo pensando que eso es cultura y es mindset. Como hemos conversado hace un momento, o sea, felizmente, yo creo que algunos de nosotros hemos estado en los 80s empezando a programar o en el acceso a computadoras o en los 90s ya con el Internet. Ahora la tecnología está completamente a mayor disposición de lo que nosotros podemos tener. Es muy rápido que podamos tener lo mismo que alguien, no sé, un niño en un colegio en Perú, que un niño en un colegio en Estados Unidos o en Europa, o igual con los trabajadores. Pero es, ¿qué hacemos con esa tecnología? El tema que vemos más es, o sea, cómo logramos convencer a las personas que dirigen las organizaciones, a los comités, a los gerentes, que este es un cambio que va a cambiar tal vez como el Internet o más de lo que se hizo. Y la forma como lo estamos abordando es de una manera muy clara. Primero, como lo hicimos con el tema de transformación digital. Empezar un trabajo de evangelización, de trabajo directo con los directivos, y luego empezar a crear unidades de experimentación en la cual tengamos un portafolio de proyectos que muchas áreas seguramente tienen, pero que tenemos un área en la cual podemos ir organizando y trabajando. Y a partir de ese laboratorio, célula o lo que pueda darse, empezar a crear un tipo de cultura diferente de prueba, de experimentos, y empezar a distribuirlo a toda la organización. Nuestro reto es lograr que en algunos de nuestros clientes esto pueda estar institucionalizado, que se usen las herramientas para generar valor financiero, valor de percepción, NPS, satisfacción y también la cantidad de usos que se da a la tecnología. Y realmente lo que yo veo, a diferencia en Estados Unidos, en Europa, es que mucho de la mentalidad de lo que se ve en las grandes empresas de tecnología y todo, es que tú les das una herramienta y las personas inmediatamente se ponen a usarla y a experimentarla. Aquí lo que nos hemos encontrado es que les das la tecnología y las personas muchas veces o la descartan por miedo o también hay un tema de que las dejan de utilizar porque tienen alucinaciones, la inteligencia artificial generativa, o se vuelve un poco más complejo, o falla, etc. Entonces, yo creo que lograr en un foco, en un laboratorio, en una célula, en un grupo, y a partir de eso crear la cultura que se quiere y empezar a expandirlo a toda la organización, es lo ideal. Lo estamos trabajando, todavía lo estamos tratando y en Latinoamérica funciona mucho lo lúdico a través de hackatones o también algo que nos ha estado viendo bastante bien es cómo hacer batallas de prompts para empezar con algo sencillo de cómo haces un mejor prompt para lograr un resultado y competir con otros equipos dentro de las organizaciones, pero ya luego trabajar realmente con los equipos directivos, o sea, cómo transformar una cultura, cómo trabajar y lograr un acompañamiento que permita que esto no se abandone, porque tenemos ya los 2 años que están con inteligencia artificial generativa, desde que salió el anuncio de ChatGPT en noviembre del 2022, pero sí hemos visto muchas empresas usarlo y dejar de usarlo, grupos o incluso algo que nos ha pasado que nos llama la atención es, algunos de nuestros clientes son transnacionales, donde las licencias y el imperativo es global, pero que en el Perú, por el tema de resultados que conversaba, se ha dejado. Entonces estamos creando esta cultura dentro de un grupo inicial y que luego se va a expandir. Y es como lo estamos trabajando y apoyándonos mucho en data, en ver indicadores y dashboards del uso, del impacto, de la mejora y la precisión en la que se tiene, y también poner indicadores financieros, o sea, cuánto realmente estoy siendo más eficiente, cuántas ventas estoy produciendo más, cuánta rentabilidad estoy generando, etcétera, aunque sea algo pequeño, empezar y ir demostrando con casos de éxito para poder verlo. Pero es un tema constante y es un tema de trabajo permanente que involucra cambiar una cultura. Y cambiar la cultura de una organización es complejo, entonces va a tomar meses o años poder hacerlo, como hemos visto que ha pasado con el tema de transformación digital, y creemos que todo el tema de inteligencia artificial generativa, inteligencia artificial, es una parte importante de esta transformación que iniciamos en algunas organizaciones hace 10 años, 5 años, 3 años en general. Así, sobre todo, pero eso yo te diría, es una respuesta todavía en proceso, con mucha experimentación, Javier.
Muchas gracias, Daniel. Bernardino, ¿cómo podrían asegurar las empresas la ética y la transparencia en el uso de tecnologías avanzadas como la IA? Sabemos que la ética y transparencia son temas clave que se conversan mucho, pero que poco sabemos qué cosas se está haciendo, ¿no? ¿Cómo se podría implementar, ¿no?
Bueno, en el caso de las empresas del Grupo Sura, como había comentado, venimos trabajando en centros de excelencia de IA en los diferentes países. Parte de estos centros de excelencia lo que tienen como objetivo es poder compartir experiencias. Definitivamente hay equipos que están más adelantados que otros y la idea es tener sinergias para poder compartir qué es lo que se hizo bien, qué es lo que falló, cómo poder mejorarlo, ¿no? Entonces, estamos haciendo, digamos, esa dinámica del lado, digamos, regional para poder tener esas como lecciones aprendidas, ¿no? Parte del COE que también se hace en todos los países es poder trabajar también en la política, los principios y el gobierno. Eso me parece que es fundamental para poder empezar, digamos, todo el trabajo de... Hoy estamos viendo más enfocados quizás a IA generativa, pero en general empezar ordenados, siguiendo principios de buen uso de la IA, y en esa línea lo que estamos trabajando es justamente en políticas que tengan que ver con transparencia, tengan que ver con trazabilidad, indicadores para poder saber si es que las cosas que se están haciendo están bien o no. Principalmente eso. Yo quería complementar la intervención de Daniel, porque también me pareció que un punto importante es, además de la cultura, es como la gestión de cambios, ¿no? Acá, digamos, las personas son sobre lo que gira todo este tema, digamos, de cambio tecnológico, ¿no? La tecnología hoy digamos, se ha democratizado y la tenemos al alcance prácticamente de todos, ¿no? Y nosotros, por ese lado, le damos como mucho foco al tema de las personas y la gestión de cambios, ¿no? Cada vez que hay alguna nueva tecnología, alguna nueva tendencia, o que queremos implementar algo nuevo, sale estos temas de incertidumbre, qué va a pasar con mi trabajo, qué es lo que va a pasar en el futuro, y una gestión del cambio adecuada creo que ayuda a promover justamente la adopción de estas nuevas tecnologías en base a capacitaciones, experimentación, perder un poco ese miedo a fallar. Y otro punto importante también considero que es que tiene que ir como de la mano y tiene que ver también con el tema de la ética y del buen uso, es que la regulación, en nuestro caso, digamos, empresas altamente reguladas, como la regulación también va acompañando el desarrollo y la adopción de estas nuevas tecnologías.
Muchas gracias, Bernardino. Andrés, desde tu experiencia, ¿cuáles son las habilidades de datos más importantes que deben desarrollar los equipos en las empresas para adaptarse mejor a este entorno digital que está en constante cambio?
Qué interesante pregunta. Mira, yo pienso que va de parte y parte, ¿no? Cuando los individuos trabajan en empresas que no permiten trabajar con los datos de manera libre, que no promueven las instancias de democratización de datos o generación, digamos, de esta curiosidad por parte de los empleados, de los que trabajan allí, eso es un freno totalmente, eso es un asesino de la innovación, un asesino de crear cosas nuevas, de imaginar cosas nuevas y resolver problemas en diferentes niveles de la empresa, ¿no? Por un lado, yo pienso que, no sé si es una frase del CEO de NVIDIA o la repetí mal, pero me pareció interesante, sé que la voy a mencionar. Y dicen, el lenguaje de programación que vamos a tener que aprender en el futuro es escribir, ¿no? Es escribir en español o en inglés, ¿no? Y siento que es real, o sea, siento que hoy las limitaciones cada vez se van bajando mucho más. Quizás si me hubieses hecho esta pregunta hace 5 años, te hubiese dicho, hace 3 años incluso, te hubiese dicho, bueno, tienes que aprender un poco de Python, y aprende otro lenguaje para que lo tengas, aprende a trabajar con data tabular, aprende a trabajar con data no estructurada, aprende lo que es la calidad de datos y la transformación de datos, por un lado, porque son cosas indispensables. Y yo pienso que todavía son indispensables porque para poder garantizar lo que es la responsabilidad y la transparencia y la gobernabilidad de modelos de lenguaje, de grandes modelos de lenguaje, tienes que poder tener el control de las fuentes de datos, tienes que poder tener el gobierno como tal de estas fuentes de datos para poder garantizar las respuestas esperadas o correctas, sobre todo la prueba constantemente estar probando que tus modelos funcionan correctamente. Y eso es un proceso de democratización, o sea, realmente es una democratización del conocimiento, de involucrar a los usuarios y a los empleados de diferentes áreas en los procesos de innovación. Creo que eso es algo súper, súper importante. Pero yo pienso que un empleado, un trabajador informado, educado, proactivo y con un mindset de innovación, y hace un rato con Sara hablamos muchísimo sobre el mindset, es un empleado, es un trabajador que va a estar feliz, que va a ser productivo y que va a avanzar, digamos, por sí solo. Entonces, creo que principalmente es eso, ¿no? Esa sed o esa cultura de conocimiento, all you can eat, ¿no? Todo el conocimiento que puedas comer es lo más importante en los diferentes niveles. Es un poquito eso. ¿Sí?
Muchas gracias, Andrés. Sara, hay un tema, en todas las partes del mundo se siente de alguna manera también como una amenaza esto. ¿Cómo podemos hacer para preparar a nuestros colaboradores o para que nuestros equipos puedan ver la IA como una oportunidad y no como una amenaza, como una herramienta para mejorar su trabajo?
That's a great question. And Javier, thank you for asking it because it continues the theme that's emerged in this panel. You've curated such a wonderful panel of expertise, and I've learned so much from listening to these three panelists who are truly on the cutting edge of the technology side of what we're talking about today, AI and automation. And yet, a huge theme that continues to emerge from all of these responses is the people element, the human element, the mindset, the culture shift. We're talking about AI and automation, and yet we keep coming back to the people. What your question just asked was specific to the fear that a lot of folks have. Something that I say a lot, I've said this many times, especially speaking with audiences that are not as technical, is it's not that AI is going to replace your job. It's more that someone who is comfortable experimenting with AI might take the job of someone who isn't. And I think that's an important shift, that it's less the futuristic movie where there's the robot army that comes to take all of the jobs and wreak all kinds of other havoc. And it's more it's another tech transformation. And like we have seen in the past, and like we will continue to see, it's important for folks to get involved and be able to experiment. Now, I think it's interesting. I think it was Andreas that talked about the murder of innovation sometimes when folks don't have access. For example, if they wanted to do some experimentation, but they were told not to use AI, or they were not given access to certain data sets or other kinds of things that really kill that experimentation, it's really important to be looking at that and making sure that folks have the opportunity to experiment in what they feel like is a safe way. And there's a couple quick things that we see in the research that are helpful here. One is the experiment mindset. So are we asking folks who are experimenting with these technologies to truly experiment, or are we asking them to solve a problem and make sure that it goes well? Is failure an option? If failure is an option and they can kind of get in trouble for that failure, then it's not an experimental mindset, because in an experiment, good, bad, it doesn't matter. It's all data. And so do we truly have experimental mindsets when we're asking folks to use these new tools or to experiment with these new tools? Another is the idea of the why. So when we ask folks to experiment, are they given a real challenge to solve? I have been lucky to work with a number of startups in the tech space specific to the Internet of Things or IoT space. So a lot of folks who are creating hardware. And what's always really interesting to me is when somebody wants to make a smart something, right? So, it's great that I have smart home elements in my home. So maybe my thermostat is smart and connects to my phone and has other sensors and things like that. But do I need a smart toaster? And I think sometimes we can do it gets ahead of do we need it? And that happens a lot when I'm working with students and with startup groups where the technology enables it and they're very excited about it, but it's not solving a real solution or a real challenge. And that theme was hit on a little bit today. And so when I'm working with organizations who want to have an innovative culture, are they looking to solve real challenges, or are they just pursuing the tech for the technology's sake? Right? It's kind of like they're trying to order it off a menu, like, hey, we need some AI. Can someone get us some of that? Where it's not really coming in to solve a problem. And that's a big issue. So instead, looking at the challenges that we have and seeing if any of those are a good fit. And so making sure we're starting with that, with the why. And then the last tip in this is we're thinking about innovative cultures and the fear that's associated with using some of this technology. One of my favorite quotes is, people support a world they help create. And so how can we involve people early on, make sure they feel like they can have a part of this conversation? If we're using, really deep tech terms, can we translate that for folks so that they feel like they can participate in the conversation, so that they feel like they're being asked? Everyone has expertise. And if there's people in your organization, they have expertise in something. And so helping to connect their expertise with what you want to do and making them feel like a part of the conversation goes a long way. The mistake that we sometimes see is that the new technology is kind of taken off into the corner and certain groups work on it, and then they don't share it. They don't talk about it. They don't invite others to come to the lab and see what it looks like, or to share their feedback or their expertise related to that same thing. And it can truly, truly go a long way. So thank you for the question. Great question. There's definitely things that we can do, but I want to recognize it is a big challenge, and solving the people challenge of technology is so important.
Muchas gracias a todos nuestros invitados. Ha sido un honor escuchar las valiosas perspectivas y experiencias de cada uno de nuestros panelistas. En nombre de la Universidad Tecnológica del Perú, Quiero darle las gracias a la doctora Globa por su valiosa presentación y a nuestros panelistas Andrés, Bernardino y Daniel por sus valiosos aportes y por compartir sus experiencias que nos han dejado reflexiones y aprendizajes significativos. Agradecemos igualmente a todos los que nos han acompañado en esta transmisión. Muchas gracias.